Flooding threatens lives and the livelihood in the Canterbury region following an overnight downpour. Man, it was massive. Thousands of homes are at risk while Timaru and Ashburton have declared a 7-day emergency. This was a red light moment. This is what a red tag moment. Effectively, only 2 times in the history have they had that. That means heavy rain. Joining us now from Queenstown, where she's meeting the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, is our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Prime Minister, good morning.
Good morning.
Not far from you, just a few hours up the road, it is wet, and banks of the Ashburton River may well breach today. It could cause all sorts of problems. Are you confident that everything's in place it needs to be?
Yes, I am. We've got the Defence Force on the ground in Ashburton, as a precautionary effort should there need to be large-scale evacuations. But as I'm sure you would have heard from the Acting Minister, Chris Farfoy, at this point, stock banks have held, but it'll be really important that we really maintain that vigilance over the next day. They're expecting the weather will start to change up by about mid-afternoon, but because of the risk of that ongoing runoff down from the hill country, we need to keep a close watch for the next 6 to 10 hours, and actually really the next 24 hours will be really critical.
Okay, so Scott Morrison, is Australia our best friend globally?
Talked about it necessarily in those terms. They are, I would consider them family, Duncan, and they are our closest family. I would say that is true. In so many respects, if I think about the leaders that I've had contact with over the last 15 months through COVID, it has been Scott and Australia where it's just been at any time we can pick up the phone, and we have. The contact has been really regular, and that's because actually we're doing something that's really unique to both of us. Our elimination strategy, or in both cases, our efforts to keep COVID-19 out and maintain a fairly normal, as much as you can, way of living. Not many other countries pursue that. So I do think there's some work for us to do together as we write the rule book for the next phase, where we think about what are our borders, how do our borders work as we look to open up to the world when it's safe to do so.
Okay, and how angry do you get when you mention the 501 deportees issue? I mean, because we've got a whole bunch of sort of Australians that have come here under the guise of being New Zealanders, and a lot of them are pretty unsavoury characters. So we've sort of, especially in the Western Bay of Plenty, they're everywhere. The Mongols have set up this new gang. Have you told them in no uncertain terms we don't want this? Why are you doing it? Can you take them back?
Oh, you will have seen from the last time we actually physically were able to meet in February of last year that I made that point strongly, and I say nothing publicly that I don't say privately, and so this has been a consistent for me from the time that I've been in this job. I have consistently raised, be it with Malcolm Turnbull or now with Scott Morrison, I have consistently raised the issue of deportations. No one's ever denied that Australia have the right legally to do what they're doing. What we've questioned is, in particular cases where we've got examples of individuals who just have virtually no connection with New Zealand, that we consider the decision to be wrong.
So why can't you convince them?
I will keep raising that.
Yeah, so maybe you need to raise it differently, because I mean, if we're not getting anywhere, how do you convince them? How can you convince them? Well,
Duncan, as I've said, I mean, the issue here is that legally they are able to do what they're doing. And in many cases, many New Zealanders who will go over to Australia won't necessarily go through the process of becoming citizens. And so this comes to the heart of one of the issues we've also been discussing over a number of years. New Zealanders, when they take on citizenship, that then gives them access to other rights and benefits of other Australians. And it really is in New Zealanders' best interest, if they are going to make Australia home, to go through that process. But there are things that have made that harder for New Zealanders in Australia. So we keep coming back to that issue as well. That'll be another thing we discuss today. But,
it's underhand, though, Brian.
Duncan,
it's like underhand. It's the underhand. Yeah, but family don't do that to each other. It's underhand. It's like the underarm bowl. It's dirty.
Oh, every family I know has its issues, but at the end of the day, you're still family. And I'd say that means that actually our relationship is family in the truest sense of the word. We do have, issues that we don't agree. And on people issues, that's where that tends to be. But actually, we agree on far more than we disagree.
No, so what do we do? Just park the 501 issue and say we can't get anywhere with it? It's just that's life.
There will never be a meeting where I don't raise this issue. So long as it continues, we will raise it.
But why raise
at
it
the
even
same
if we're
time,
not
Duncan,
getting anywhere? But why if you're not getting anywhere?
Oh, because for us, because we consider it to be wrong. So you don't ignore the things that you consider to be wrong. But at the same time, Duncan, it's my job in this environment as well to make sure that where we have opportunities to work together on things that are in our day-to-day lives going to affect us, like COVID management, to make some progress on those issues at the same time.
China, why don't we go in with, when we look at the China issue, why don't we go in as one, as a regional grouping? China, so you've got Australia and New Zealand there together. Be more powerful, wouldn't it, as a bloc?
Well, in many cases we do. In fact, more often than we don't. So I think probably what we're dealing with here at the moment, Duncan, is more a perception issue, particularly I noticed from the Australian media, than reality. So, I don't want to play in too much to what is a perception rather than what we know to be happening on the ground. And so for us, we have an independent foreign policy. We will often, take a position that will be alongside other countries. Sometimes it'll be just us in Australia, and sometimes we'll make statements on our own. I think the most important point is that we will raise issues when we see it. We just choose different ways in order to raise those issues.
Have we said
are
to
not
China,
silent on our concerns.
No, have we said to Beijing, hey, this Aussie media stuff, it's all crap? Don't believe them?
Oh, no. I say it publicly. I don't see that. And actually, I think probably what the leaders in Beijing hear is when I raise issues directly, which I do. The last time I visited was in 2019, and at that time I raised directly the very issues that we raise publicly as well. And that's a part of the way we do things. We'll do things in private, we'll say the same in public as well.
The bike lane protest, the cycle lane protest over the Auckland Harbour Bridge at the weekend, I support what they did. They're frustrated, those cyclists. They've had enough of waiting, Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, look, here I'm not going to disagree with what we need to achieve. Like, we need to be able to connect the North Shore and the Auckland CBD through other modes of transport that aren't just buses and cars. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find people who didn't agree with that idea. And of course, we've been big supporters of the creation of a means to do that safely. So SkyPath has been the proposal that's been put forward. In recent times, very unfortunately, there's been suggestions from engineers that actually the idea of attaching SkyPath to the Harbour Bridge is more problematic than was first thought from an engineering perspective. So we have to find another way. But I'm not giving up on the idea that we have to find a way to enable people to use alternative modes of transport to move around our city. So that I absolutely agree with.
What about the protest and then breaking through the barricades past the police and onto the bridge? Do you support that? I'm
not going to support people breaking through a police barricade because my job is to make sure they're safe and that other people are safe too.
It's a very good answer.
And that, that I cannot support. The mission, what we need to do, yes.
You're on Mark's side this morning because I actually support them doing that because they're frustrated because they've had years and years and years of being sort of false hope and everything.
I understand frustration, Duncan, but you can't be in a position where people, if someone was hurt, of course we might be having a very different conversation. Nice. My job's to look after everyone's safety.
God, you sound like Mark Richardson this morning. Both of you are saying the same thing on the same side.
You're on your own, Duncan.
I want you to know I took that position not knowing Mark's, but I would still hold it regardless.
Okay, so why don't we do that? So the bridge is a bit of a dog, right? It can't take anything else on it. It doesn't take any more weight. So do you think, and I'm thinking big picture here, and you're the person to speak to when it comes to big picture, that ultimately the bridge needs to be replaced by something bigger, better, stronger that can carry all those modes of transport we've spoken about?
In the future, yes. In the future, yes. But I think, and this is where I absolutely, hear the cyclists on this, that is some way off. And so if we're saying that they have to wait until the third harbour crossing is built, that's a long way away.
How long?
So we do have to think about alternatives in the meantime.
It's not even in the planning, Prime Minister.
Some of the proposals, of course.
No one's planning it.
That's not true, but some of the alternatives that are discussed are about underground alternatives, and of course you've got to question there whether that's appropriate for alternative modes of transport like walking and cycling, and also we have to make sure what we build is fit for purpose for alternative public transport use as well. So the problem is, Duncan, that's too long to ask people to wait.
Is there a plan?
The third harbour crossing that is most often mooted is underground and is a number of years away. It is a significant transport project because it needs to future-proof Auckland's growth.